All right, guys, let's have a look at some NBA check-ins, trade deadline sort of talk across the league. The first team we're going to be looking at is the Miami Heat, looking at some players there who potentially could get moved at the trade deadline. I'd say probably the number one candidate to be moved in Miami, it's not Hassan Whiteside, it's probably Rodney McGruder, who's fallen out of the rotation. He's making NBA minimum salary and he'll be a restricted free agent after this season. He is 27 years of age and going to be turning 28 in a couple of months' time. So that limits some of his value, but I think him or Wayne Ellington are probably the two most likely guys to be moved because they can help contenders either for three-point shooting like Ellington or for defense like McGruder, but they're guys who aren't even in the rotation in Miami. And what could happen there is perhaps they get someone back in return who is in the rotation. Probably unlikely, those guys aren't going to be good enough to come back in that scenario. So they're probably the most likely guys to move. But let's talk a little bit about Hassan Whiteside. Everyone wants to stash Bam Adebayo because Whiteside's getting traded. Hassan Whiteside's due $50+ million. Actually, that's not fully true because this season is almost halfway done. But in terms of cap figures, he's due $25 million as a cap number this year, $27 million next season for the cap. And total salary. Like, what sort of team is going to want to acquire a guy who's not that good, who struggles in the modern NBA, and is due $27 million when most teams next season want to be preserving cap space for the free agents that are out there, or just to give themselves that sort of flexibility? I cannot see Whiteside getting traded at this trade deadline, and while I do love Bam Adebayo, I don't think that Whiteside is going anywhere. Or I don't think that Whiteside is getting benched for him at any time soon. That could be the case next season. Whiteside could be moved on in the off-season. He could be benched next season. I just don't think that it's going to happen this season. There's going to be games where Whiteside gets benched. There's going to be games where he plays 30 minutes a night. And we've seen that all throughout this season. I just don't think this is going to be a consistent, likely thing for this Miami team. And always when you talk about guys, and obviously the Heat would love to get rid of Hassan Whiteside, but ask yourself this question: who wants him? Who wants him to pay him this much money? And who has the salaries, or what sort of players are around that make that sort of salary to send back to match? Whiteside is a bad asset, so the Heat would have to attach something to him. Who are their assets to send out? Is it Derrick Jones Jr.? Is that enough of an asset? Probably not. Do they send another first-round pick? It's always a possibility with Riley. He doesn't really value the draft all that much, but they're not in a strong position here at the moment, the Heat. Who wants to take it back, and who wants to send that much salary back? That's the question there with this team. And when you look through the rest of their roster, I don't think Kelly Olynyk is a target to get traded. I don't think James Johnson is getting traded. I know that Winslow isn't. I know that Josh Richardson isn't. But if there's any team that's always in the hunt for a superstar, it is the Heat. Now, they're probably not going to get them, as we've seen, over multiple attempts to try and acquire one, whether it's Gordon Hayward in free agency or whether it's trying to trade for general soreness Jimmy Butler. They've been unsuccessful in those scenarios. But they do like getting involved in those things. I just don't really see a scenario where any sort of major shake-up deal is coming for this Heat team, and the one that everyone wants to happen, the Whiteside situation, just seems really, really unlikely, and not likely to happen or go down this season. Let's talk about the Milwaukee Bucks now. A quick check-in on them and some trade deadline stuff. Of course, the news came out about 24 hours ago. Woj broke that Thon Maker's agents have said to the Bucks, "We'd like you to find us a trade where we can get to a better situation to find more playing time." And I tweeted this out. I think Thon gets some pretty poor advice at times. He's lost his spot to DJ Wilson. He was third string behind the Muppet John Henson. He was traded. He had an opportunity. He just isn't good enough. So they want him to go to a scenario where he can find himself in a better role to get more playing time. He isn't good enough to find himself in that sort of a role. And we've seen this for years and years. 3 years. He just isn't that good as an NBA player at this point. Now, I saw someone post this over on Reddit, a link to Woj's tweet, saying, should we go and grab Maker and stash him because he's going to get traded? Like, I think we all need to just calm down on so many of these things. Just because he's requested a trade doesn't mean it's going to happen. And 99% chance that if he does get traded, he's not becoming a fantasy asset or finding himself in a starting role anyway. Like, who is trading for Thon to become their starting center? Who is it? Which team wants Maquette? Like, a team that probably should be looking at him is someone like the Knicks, but they want to do everything they can to preserve that cap space for next season. And their centre is Kristaps Porzingis. So will they want Maquette to come in and be that backup guy? Maybe. But Mitchell Robinson's going to be that guy. So who is trying to trade for Thon, and is he good enough to demand extra minutes? No, is the answer to that. Like, he's not good enough to demand extra minutes. He hasn't been good this season. He's struggling with his shot. He's not providing the solid enough level of defense that he needs to. His rebounding hasn't been excellent. He had an opportunity. There was a huge opportunity here for him in Milwaukee, and he wasn't able to do it. He's shooting just 33% from three this season. He's blocking just 1.6 shots per 36, which is okay, but it's not elite rim protection. He's not hitting free throws. He's at 54%. He's never been above 70% in his career. The two-pointers, he doesn't really take many of those, but they're not going in at a huge rate either for a big man. He doesn't finish around the rim. His rebounding is not ideal. He just needs to sit tight in Milwaukee and absorb the, I guess, the not indignity, but the limits to his playing time, because if Lopez goes down, then maybe he does have to jump in. Maybe they throw DJ Wilson in there, but maybe Maquette, as a 7-footer, could come in and provide some minutes. So I don't think there's anything to really look at with him getting traded, and he very well might get dealt. I just don't think that it's going to be anything interesting. They've made their trade this season. George Hill arriving for Dellavedova and Henson. They could make another one at some point. Yeah, Jason Smith came in as well as a part of that whole scenario there. I just don't see anything major here. The starting five, Antetokounmpo, Bledsoe, Brogdon, Middleton, and Lopez, that nothing is changing with that starting five. Nothing is changing with that sort of level of guys. And then your next three off the bench, George Hill, DJ Wilson, and Sterling Brown, I think they're relatively solid there. So I don't really see any major candidates to get traded apart from Thon. And even then, that's not going to be a big, impactful type of scenario. All right, let's do a quick fantasy check-in now on the Minnesota Timberwolves, who, of course, have made a big trade this season already, sending general soreness Jimmy Butler out in return for Robert Covington, Jared Bayless, and Dario Saric. And actually, Bayless has been quite useful with with all of Tyus Jones, Jeff Teague, and Derrick Rose out. He's been starting at point guard and doing pretty well for them. Is there another player in this team that looks like a potential trade candidate? I'm sure they would love to get themselves off Andrew Wiggins' deal. Nobody is taking that on. The trade that I could see happening is in the point guard scenario. Now, whether that's Jeff Teague or Tyus Jones, I'm not sure, but I feel like that both of those. Now, Teague's got a player option for this season for $19 or $20 million. I would assume that he does actually exercise that option and opt into that contract at $20 million, because I don't think with how he's played this season that he's going to be getting $20 million on the open market. Tyus Jones, on the other hand, is a restricted free agent. Maybe they're not going to be able to pay him the amount of money that he could attract on the open market. So I think he is a possibility to get moved, and he would be someone that I'm absolutely really interested in, whether that's going to Phoenix, going to Orlando, going to New York. Like, he is, I think, an absolutely not top notch, but he is a starting caliber point guard who could be a top 100 fantasy guy in 30 plus minutes a night. He can score, he can shoot, but most importantly, he gets steals and he gets assists. And getting those values or getting those stats in high numbers, which he can do, really does translate into a very, very solid fantasy guy. And you can add 2 threes in there and shoot that at 40%, which he can do. A realistic type of scenario for Tyus is being a guy who could come in and average 12, 4, and 7 with 1.8 steals and 2 threes. I think he could do that. Low usage, but I think he could be that guy and be a top 100 guy. All he needs is 30 minutes is to be a top 100 guy. Now, his per 36 numbers, they're not jumping off the page. Only 9.6 points. That's not great, but he is doing it by shooting just 38%. A real down season for his shooting this year. He is normally a much better shooter than this. But 7 assists, 2.3 steals, and 84% from the line. That's where the value can come from Tyus, and I think that the field goal shooting will come back up. He's shooting just 42% on his 2-pointers after being at 53% last season, and the threes are down at 30% after being at 35 and 36 each of the last 2 years. So it is a bit of a down season for Tyus, but he is a guy that absolutely I want to watch, because if they do decide to move him, because they've got Bayless and Teague and Rose there, then I do think that he has significant interest, whatever team he goes to, because I think he's a starting caliber point guard in the NBA. And that'll do it for looking at the fantasy check-ins across these three teams: the Heat, the Bucks, and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Guys, hope you enjoyed it.